Hello, daily vlog number 6. I got it right this time. Off to a good start. So definitely, retrospectively, comparative to yesterday, I'm feeling a lot better. A lot more back in my element. It was nice to actually get back in front of the classroom and in that teaching position again. I definitely had that pep back to my step, and I felt like I finally got back onto the energy and wavelength that I had been hoping for when I had got back. Those feelings of initial nervousness, and I'm still overwhelmed, do not get me wrong, but I'm managing it a lot better than yesterday when it all just kind of came to this pinnacle. And I'm really just trying to hone that energy and make sure that I'm carrying it through to the rest of this program and into my teaching. Definitely a better start. I really wanted to just emphasize how the concepts that we talk about in class, like for today, we did talk about a multitude of things. But for me, what really personally sticks out, I would have to say, is just the fact that we were all able to relate with one another, have those moments of open conversation again, and ultimately those little things, the little potatoes, those hurdles that we encounter in navigating them, like they're just little potatoes. They don't have to stop our entire journey just because a little potato is in the road. I also really am just happy to be feeling like I can do this rather than kind of that despair that I had yesterday. So that was really nice to kind of get out of that funk and back onto the energy and wavelength that I wanted to be on and was craving again. On the topic of conversation for the examples in differentiated instruction and non-differentiated instruction, I full-heartedly agreed that assigning an advanced student to teach a struggling student is not always, like, that's not beneficial, because you've essentially just put the ownership and onus on somebody else to do your job for them. Do not get me wrong, there are organic moments like that in the classroom that can happen. For example, a student has their hand up, the person next to them's like, oh, like, this happened in my class, like, oh, what are you gonna ask? And then they're like, oh, I don't know how to do this. And they're like, oh, I know how to do it, I'll help you. I encourage that thoroughly because it was initiated by them and they wanted to help. I feel like putting a student in that forced perspective where they now have to teach somebody when they necessarily might not want to, especially if it becomes a constant, that can be detrimental, because now instead of focusing on their own learning, they're going to be trying to make sure that other person is caught up. And at the end of the day, like, we do want them to be able to teach one another, absolutely, but you don't want it to just be completely on that person. You don't want the ownership on that student to completely teach another, right? Because then it might put back their progress, even though teaching somebody else something is the best way to memorize something, which is why I do encourage it when it happens organically. When it becomes an expectation, now we are entering that zone where it can become a detriment to that student who is considered, quote, advanced. The giving advanced students no homework, I don't agree with that. How are they, if anything, they should be getting maybe different homework that challenges them even more. Grouping students into different classes based on their ability, also something I'm not a fan of. The letting advanced students out of class early to give them more free playtime, I also don't agree with, because if you need time to work on things, and if you are advanced, you're probably going to take that time to advance your work even further. And then the last point for the non-examples, simply allowing students to choose their own books to read off that list. I don't really... it might be harder to get everybody on the same page to a degree. If a student is behind and another one is ahead, I had found through my experience and learned and was advised from Tim to not hold the rest of my class back to make sure everybody's at the same spot, If a student is showing that they can show that level of advancement and that they're yearning for that, then you nurture that and encourage it by giving them more advanced tasks, because you want to nurture their learning, but you also want to nurture the students who are not necessarily at the same level. So you want to make sure it's kind of like a juggling act. You're making sure every student is getting what they need. Equity. The examples of actual differentiated instruction, you need variety. That is the key thing for me. I'm thinking of just UDL, multimodal learning, making sure that you have resources available, enrichment materials. I really liked the one point of the one-on-one coaching with the student designed for his or her specific challenges. I talked about this yesterday. I believe every student should have their own IEP. Why is every student not getting their own personalized plan for success? That would be beneficial to anybody, even if you didn't necessarily have a disability. So that's something I think is wonderful to do in differentiated instruction. Students put into small groups designed so they can help each other grow is much better, just rather than putting a bunch of students together and just kind of rating them in that regard. Everybody has strengths, everybody has weaknesses. We're all human. Recognizing and having the ability to recognize that is its own strength, and making sure that everybody is being set up for success is another. I like the idea of adaptive scaffolding assessments. So is it going to get easier? Is it going to get harder? What does that student need to get to the next the next step, right? We're trying to think about how we can meet those individual needs, which again is why I believe every student should be having an IEP plan, regardless of if they have a disability or not. Other than that, I also wanted to touch base on the really wonderful multiliteracies project. I personally wanted to talk about Vanessa Persad. As a ComTech teacher to another, I heavily resonated with what she was talking about, and I love that she put the ownership on her students to create that logo project, and it's giving them real world application. They're talking to a client, they're acquiring all that information, and they're giving them a product. There's now also accountability, because this student is waiting for this other student to give them the product. Just like in the real world, you're gonna have those moments where you need to do client consultations. I've done them multiple times. I never have gone into a photo shoot where I didn't at least have one in person or on the phone conversation with the people I was photographing. I want to have a thorough understanding of what they want to achieve, what their expectations are. I want to be able to communicate on how I believe I'll be able to meet those expectations or exceed them. I want to know what my clients are comfortable with as well. That's something that's extremely important to me. Making sure that I'm relaying their vision back to them and that everybody's on the same page, because depending on the event, if it's a wedding, you can't exactly redo it. But if you're doing a portrait session or a product session, for example, it's a little different in the sense where you could do it again if you don't do it correctly the first time, but that reflects poorly on your performance and your professionality. So having those really formal chats helps everybody make sure that we're all have the same expectations, that you know what your plan is, and it avoids any kind of miscommunication that can potentially arise. And I'm going to leave it short and sweet right there. Have a wonderful day, everybody. See ya.